Living here in southern Pennsylvania, we really don't have to worry about the major effects of a hurricane, but we do have to worry about the thunderstorms, tornadoes, and damage it can cause once it moves inland. Along the shore, there are hurricane or tropical storm watches or warnings, and just like anything else we studied, that means strong winds could happen under a watch, and they will happen soon under a warning. These alerts are only really along the shore. And before a hurricane comes on shore, it can be over a wide, extensive area. This was the warnings for Hurricane Katrina. And you can see in red there where the hurricane warnings stretch along most of the coast of Louisiana, all of coastal Mississippi and Alabama. There's also a cone there indicating that the path of that hurricane could wander anywhere within that cone. And hurricanes are large. Just because you're not close to the exact center of the storm coming on shore doesn't mean it can get bad for you. The uncertainty is getting better over time. Back in 2005, you can see the cone of uncertainty to where it would be today if they were going to issue the same forecast. But they do fluctuate over time. Check out what happened with Hurricane Isaac. Every 6 hours, a new cone was drawn, and that's a different color here on this map. But the actual path is there in red. And you can see that it stays within the bounds of those cones, but those cones do wander over time. Here is Hurricane Irene. Each computer model forecast of what the hurricane is going to do are the solid colors, and what it ended up actually doing is the dotted black line of arrows. So hurricanes can be very unpredictable as far as their path. What kills most people in a hurricane is flooding. And it's not flash flooding, it's a different kind of flooding called a storm surge. Let me show you how it works. Okay, here I have a tub full of water right up to the top. We've already demonstrated that we can get currents on this by just blowing gently on top of that water. But what if you're a hurricane? A hurricane is going to have very, very intense winds. And what that's going to do is it's going to push this water up over the edge, like so. I've kind of made a mess. So now imagine that you're living along the beach. If you're in that area where the wind is coming on shore, particularly strong, you're going to get a water level rise of a couple of feet. That's what the storm surge is. When they say there's a 10-foot storm surge, they don't mean it's going to go inland 10 feet. They are telling you it's going to go up 10 feet. And that's a big deal if you live on a barrier island like this one, where the highest piece of land might only be 5 or 10 feet above sea level. So evacuations are the only way that these people can stay safe if a major storm approaches. If the flooding's not enough to scare you away from the beach during an impending storm, hurricanes frequently create their own tornadoes within their thunderstorms, and the wind itself can be quite damaging. These people were in the path of Typhoon Haiyan. And they took shelter in this building, and they were lucky to survive as the storm surge took out many of the buildings around them. As this wall of water comes in, you would not be able to escape that in a storm if you were still in the area. On the Saffir-Simpson scale, when you have a Category 5 storm, you can get a 20-foot storm surge. That's 2 stories high. While a tornado can cause worse damage in a localized area, hurricane damage can be very extensive over a very wide area. And not all places in a hurricane's path get equal amounts of destruction. Typically, the right side of the storm is the worst side to be on, because the winds are swirling around that hurricane in a cyclonic motion. So that means on the right side of the storm, you have the wind speed added to the actual speed of the system itself. So if you have a hurricane with 90-mile-an-hour winds and it's moving 10 miles an hour forward, on the right side you'll have 100-mile-an-hour winds, and on the opposite side only 80 miles an hour. And Drew found an odd place to demonstrate that.
So I'm at an airport right now, and these moving walkways are like the moving speed of a hurricane. You actually end up walking faster when you're on these versus if you're right there. Here's the reason why. Besides you walking normally, and if you walk normally you'd be the same as if you were there versus right here, well, this is moving you along, and this has a forward speed. So the speed of this is adding to your walking speed to get you down the line faster. It's just like a hurricane. The fastest winds are in the direction in which it moves. Oh, just in case you're curious with the Denver airport.
So this is a satellite image of New Orleans. They have Lake Pontchartrain to the north, the Mississippi River to the south, and the city of New Orleans itself is actually below sea level. They use pumps to keep the water out of the city. A levee broke during Hurricane Katrina, and that filled up the city with water. This is a satellite picture from May of 2000 before the flooding, and then here's a picture of the city with the flooding. If this was before your time, Hurricane Katrina was a huge disaster in the United States. Many famous landmarks were underwater and people were trapped in their homes. That's the Superdome. Many people fled to the Superdome because it was the highest point in elevation in the area. Hundreds of people were trapped inside with bathrooms that quickly clogged. Outside of the Superdome, the Coast Guard was making regular rescues using boats and helicopters rescuing people on roofs. But while New Orleans gets all the press, it was actually worse in Biloxi, Mississippi. This is a satellite picture of the downtown Biloxi prior to Hurricane Katrina. And this is a picture afterwards. That building in the center is the casino that floated off its moorings on the ocean into the middle of town. Pass Christian, Alabama had most of its shorefront washed away. You can see clearly in this satellite picture the pile of debris and the pads where the houses used to be as the storm surge came very far inland at this part of the country. Locally here, we've had to deal with Hurricane Sandy, which wasn't even a hurricane when it came on shore. It lost its tropical characteristics. But the path of the storm and the shape of the shoreline leading to New York City caused this kind of funneling effect that dumped a lot of water into Manhattan. Sandy took an unusual path at the United States, veering to its left, actually moving from the east to west, something that normally doesn't happen here. What you're seeing here is a map of the New York City area. And in red are all the places that were underwater from Hurricane Sandy, beating in some cases the 500-year flood zone. It caused extensive damage throughout the East Coast, especially in New Jersey and Long Island. And because of Sandy, our hurricane warnings have changed. Since 2014, storm surges are now displayed with warnings on a map, and people with mobile devices have easy access to this. Here's an example from Hurricane Matthew in 2016. This is along the Florida coast. If we zoom in a little bit there on the Palm Coast, you can see very clearly if you are living in an area that the National Weather Service believes will be underwater or not. They can use these maps and this information to try to encourage people to leave. That's the best way to avoid the devastation of a hurricane. Here in the Susquehanna Valley, most of our big floods have occurred from tropical systems. You have Agnes in 1972 and Lee in 2011. These floods can begin sooner than and longer than the passage of the eye of the storm. So, safety is pretty easy. If you live near the shore, board up the house and get out, especially if you're told to leave. If you stay, prepare for floods and tornadoes. Some people throw hurricane parties, and then they regret it when they're in the eye of the storm. In recent memory, Typhoon Haiyan is the 4th worst tropical system ever. Katrina is 7th, and Andrew is 10th. The peak wind was 196 miles an hour, the highest ever observed in a system. Over 7,000 people died, 30,000 injured, $2 billion in damage. 6,000 people died on one island alone. And it was just 2 weeks after a devastating earthquake. This is the path that it took through the South Pacific. And that's a satellite picture of the typhoon. If we put that in the Gulf of Mexico and compared it to Hurricane Katrina, it was much, much worse than Katrina. The strongest hurricane ever in the Western Hemisphere actually took place in the Eastern Pacific. And it's recent. Hurricane Patricia in October of 2015 was one of those rare hurricanes that actually curved back and hit the western coast of Mexico. The strongest hurricane in the Atlantic Basin was Hurricane Wilma, which took place in October of 2005, the same year of Katrina and Rita. Hurricane frequency has been increasing. Now, it could be due to the fact that we have better monitoring systems and we have better satellites in order to figure out where the hurricanes are, but some people attribute this to climate change and global warming. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in this class. In 2016, the last year I have full data, these were the hurricane tracks in the Atlantic Basin. Notice most of them started right off the coast in Africa and tracked towards the west. When they got far enough to the north, they curved and went back out to sea. 2005, the most recent year with a plethora of hurricanes, had them all over the Atlantic Ocean. Now, hurricanes have names. And just like the numbers of famous athletes, they can have their names retired. On this list, as of May 4th of 2017, is Agnes, all the way down to Camille, from Carla to Diane, Dean to Fifi. I really wanted to have a Hurricane Fifi. Flora to Hannah, and it continues on the next page from Hattie to Ivan and Jean to Noel, Opal, Paloma, Rita, Roxanne, Sandy, Stan, Thomas, and Wilma. As of this date, there are 80 names that have been retired. Once a name's taken off the list, then a group of meteorologists get together and they consider what name to replace it with. Girl names are replaced with girls, boy names are replaced with boys. And every list has to reflect the multicultural makeup of the country at that point. Now, there are 6 lists that have been created, and we rotate through them over the course of the years. So after 2021, we'll go back to the list there under 2016, with, of course, any retired names being replaced by them. I'm recording this in 2017, so the first hurricane this year is Arlene, a girl's name. Notice the 2018 list starts with a boy's name, Alberto. As you go down the 2017 list, we also go back and forth between boys and girls. Arlene, Brett, Cindy, Don, Emily, Franklin, Gert, Harvey, Ima, Jose, Katya, Lee, Maria, Nate, Ophelia, Philippe, Rita, Sean, Tammy, Vince, and Whitney. Do those names sound familiar? Well, they're the same list of names that we had back in 2005. But of course, Wilma's been replaced with Whitney, Rita's been replaced with Rena, and Katrina has been replaced with Katya. So this ends the video lessons for this module on severe weather. I hope you've learned how you're warned that something's coming, and I hope you now know how to stay safe in different severe weather situations.